Hello, and welcome to the Fear Channel, a channel with regular broadcasts telling the most chilling of urban legends, ghost stories, and forays into the darkest corners of the human mind. Those faint of heart or prone to night terrors should proceed at their own risk. Tonight's story is The Bleeding Horse, favorite number 7 Omnibus.
Take my word for it, there is no such thing as an ancient village, unillustrated by its legends of terror. You might as well expect to find decayed cheese without mites, or an old house without rats, as an antique and dilapidated town without an authentic population of goblins. Such is the case of the area known as Rathmines, south of Dublin. An oil painting by the English artist David Snagg shows Portobello House as it stood in the halcyon days of 1809, 2 years after it opened as a hotel. It depicts gentlemen with walking sticks and ladies with parasols strolling on the lawn near the lock. A canal boat approaches in the distance. This splendid painting now hangs on the first floor of the Period Georgian Museum at 29 Fitzwilliam Street, and is available for public viewing without prior appointment. If you should see this painting firsthand, you will notice that the horizon line bends, rather unusually, to give the viewer an impossible stereoscopic perspective that does not in actuality exist. Jutting into view at the far left side of Snagg's canvas is a bridge spanning the water at the Grand Canal's 6th lock. This bridge is known locally as the Portobello Bridge, but local tradition in this case is not exactly accurate. The bridge's real name is revealed on 2 overlooked plaques affixed to the northwest and southeast sides of the bridge itself. They read, Latouche Bridge, 1791. Latouche Bridge was named after David Digges Latouche de Rompier, a French Huguenot who served alongside William III of Orange in the Battle of the Boyne in 1690. After the battle, and a short time in the crinoline trade, Latouche established a powerful, eponymous bank just across the road from Newcomen and Company on Castle Street. The Latouche family soon became a dynasty of sorts that would affect Dublin's economic and political climate for generations. If truth be told, David Latouche Esquire, Digges Latouche's grandson, was in fact the treasurer of the Grand Canal Company at the time of the bridge's dedication. Latouche Bridge and the roads leading up to it on either side have now been redesigned into a gentle gradient beginning well before the bridge itself. Aside from periodic motor crashes, this gradual slope is of no particular note to the modern driver, other than the non-significant vista it provides of Rathmines and, on sunny days, a rather eye-catching view of the Dublin mountains pressed against the sky beyond. But in the mid-19th century, Latouche Bridge was far steeper. It was a dangerous gauntlet for drivers of the old horse-drawn omnibuses, which, unlike today's buses, were run to stringent timetables. Over the centuries, the Rathmines stretch of the Grand Canal, which Latouche Bridge spans, has seen its fair share of calamities. Some say that this particular expanse of waterway is even prone to them. Since the canal opened in 1756, there have been numerous suicides, countless drownings, one as recent as 2003. The capsizing in 1792 of a passage boat with 150 travelers bound for County Kildare, and perhaps the single most tragic and memorable misfortune of all, an accident in 1861 involving the ill-fated favorite number 7 omnibus and its 6 unfortunate passengers. At about 9:20 p.m., on Saturday the 6th of April, 1861, the favorite number 7 omnibus was heading north along the Rathmines Road. The bus departed from Rathgar and was due to terminate at Nelson's Pillar on Sackville Street. It was pulled by 2 large draft horses, and it carried 8 passengers. It stopped at the top of the bridge and let 2 people disembark. 6 remained on board when the conductor, a chap by the name of Patrick Costello, signaled the all clear to the driver. Heavy rain in Dublin is common in the springtime, and this night was no exception. The steep bridge was slick with water, and visibility was at a minimum. Badger, a stout gray horse, and his companion, a bay mare, had reliably pulled the number 7 for years, but on this night, something spooked the latter of the two equines, causing the harness to catch in the pole chain. Patrick Costello disembarked to calm the horses, but did not appear to be concerned with any impending danger. According to a report in the Freeman's Journal on the following Monday, the horses both got restive and began to back into the direction of Rathmines. The driver, Patrick Hardy, turned their heads towards the east with the intention of making them go up the incline of the hill at an angle. This involved the partial locking of the four wheels. The back part of the bus came in contact with a wooden fence between the lock and the road. The back wheels went over the granite curb. The horses pulled, but in vain. A witness stated at the inquest that the bridge's wooden fence, undoubtedly rotted from years of dirty weather, yielded like straw, and the omnibus, horses and all, plunged backwards into the lock chamber. The noise of the buses splintering against the granite sides of the lock and the terrified snorting of the horses as they fell must have been horrible. From the passengers, however, not a sound was emitted, whether because terror had deprived them of the utterance or the shock of the fall had silenced them. The horses fell between the omnibus and the bridge, where they struggled for their lives, and for some time after the fall, they kicked their hooves against the wooden breakwater. The bus came to a rest at the bottom of the lock, its door, the only means of escape, facing downwards. You can see today that the lock is quite deep, 24 feet to be exact, and on the evening in question, it was already half filled with water. In the panic and confusion of the moment, O'Neill, the lock keeper, opened the upper sluice. "In the name of God, O'Neill, what have you done?" one onlooker cried. "I'll float the bus," was O'Neill's reply. It would be an understatement to say that the result was not quite what he had hoped. The lock flooded with water, submerging all the upended front of the bus. As soon as the mistake was realized, the lock keeper scrambled to drain the chamber, but by then it was already too late. By this time, a small crowd of onlookers had assembled to watch what was already a considerable tragedy. Though with the lock still draining, there was admittedly little anyone could do. Police Constable Gaffney was the first on the scene. He promptly rescued from the lock the driver, Patrick Hardy, who had miraculously leapt clear from the horses and escaped with only a broken arm. The Freeman's Journal continues, "When the water was let off from the lock, so as to expose the top of the bus, P.C. Gaffney and Private Smith of the 4th Light Dragoons, who arrived shortly after Gaffney, got a cleaver and hatchets. With the aid of the latter, got on to the roof of the bus, broke a hole in the roof, and took out the 6 bodies. The first to be fished from the shattered wreck was Mrs. O'Connell, scarcely alive and still clutching her infant in her arms. The baby, however, was dead. Private Smith worked to revive Mrs. O'Connell, but without success. Before she was hurried off into eternity, she was heard to mutter to Smith, 'Where's our driver?' Also among the deceased were Michael Gunn, father of the brothers John and Michael Gunn, who later founded the Gaiety Theatre on King Street in 1871, and the noted painter Horace W. Leach. Leach was famous for his portraits of prominent members of the Protestant ascendancy, including the famous solicitor George Bennett, Q.C., Lieutenant Colonel James Balcombe, and Sir William Wilde. As each successive victim was retrieved from the wreck and laid out on the bridge, one onlooker remarked, "The appearance of the bodies presented a most touching sight. All looked calm and placid, as if no struggle supervened in the calamitous moment." The newspaper reports were damning, particularly those in the Irish Times. Was the driver a steady and careful man? Where is the conductor? He escaped, and there's no good reason why he shouldn't have helped the passengers escape also. There are thousands of rumors afloat, and they who could give decisive testimony are all dead. The verdict given by the jury at the inquest was that Everyone exerted himself to the best of his judgment, and no blame was ascribed to any party. On the coroner's report was written, incessus in uno, incessus in omnibus, which is then further clarified in English as a fatal bodily shock to the omnibus occupants, as caused by the vehicle falling into the lock by accident due to adverse weather conditions. This then was determined the official cause of death, not drowning, and though everyone, including the lockkeeper, was exonerated of responsibility, those who survived seemed weighed down by what today would be called survivor's guilt. The first to die was O'Neill, the lockkeeper, who took his own life one Sunday the following year when he bound his ankles and legs up tight with sturdy twine and threw himself bodily into the very same lock he managed for 35 years. The Evening Chronicle was the only newspaper to report the brief and uninteresting facts. These facts concerned prolonged melancholy and moroseness, and I will not bore you with them here. Anyone with an interest in this sort of thing can read more in the Chronicle's Dublin Notes department. The second to die was Patrick Costello, the conductor. By all accounts, Costello was never the same in the wake of the accident, and ceased his employment with the Omnibus company shortly thereafter. He became something of a recluse, and that summer took up residency in the shelter of a large tree in the middle of a quiet paddock near Rathgar. The farmer tolerated him for a couple of months before complaining to the town commissioners, who promptly acted. Destitute and having no immediate family to support him, Costello became a ward of the state. For the next 5 years, he was confined to the Richmond District Lunatics Asylum on Brunswick Street, then situated at the edge of the city. Upon his release on the first weekend in April 1866, Costello was reportedly heading west along Brunswick Street towards the countryside when he was struck dead under the wheels of a large black omnibus of unknown origin. The only witness to the accident was the driver of a Guinness delivery wagon, who was also forced off the road by the speeding bus. "It set a heart across me," said the drayman. "She came out of nowhere. The poor man, he was all hunched over with his back to the road, like he knew something was coming. But he didn't see it until it was too late. I still remember that horrible look in his eye as he died there on the road. The poor man." For a while, the Metropolitan Police sought information leading to the apprehension of the black omnibus's driver, but with no known family to exert continued pressure on the police, the case was eventually dropped. No one was ever identified in connection with the accident. The last to die was Patrick Hardy, the driver of the favorite number 7 omnibus. Unlike the others, his death was more prolonged and painful due to tormented memories intensified by the effects of alcohol abuse, to which he wholly succumbed after the accident. Hardy lived in a small thatched cottage with his ever-tolerant wife in an area next to a bend in the Swan River known as the Chains, near modern-day Winefield Road. Although pardoned of any responsibility, Hardy quit his job as an omnibus driver immediately following the inquest and took up residency at Burke's Public House, not more than a few yards away from his front door. Until his death in 1892, Hardy never strayed far from the well-worn path between his cottage and the pub, and he was never seen to cross a street for the rest of his life. As he shuffled to the drinking establishment every afternoon, he always kept one eye on the road. When sober, which was not often, he displayed an edgy disposition, not to be mistaken for impoliteness, whether peering expectantly into the distance during conversation or glancing over his perpetually hunched shoulders. But if given enough drink, he always became more genial, and since he was in a state of constant drunkenness, he was a generally well-liked character. For the price of a few pints, and if he had not yet passed out, he would treat random strangers to a version of events on the night of April 6th, 1861. In 1891, that stranger was Dr. R.M. Hubbardy of Manchester, who interviewed Hardy and recorded the anecdote for his book, An Examination of Imbibed Alcohols. In it, he wrote, "We turn now to Ireland, whose working class is known to be plagued by a largely uncontrolled compulsion to drink. Mr. Patrick Hardy of Rathmines is a most singular and persistent case of alcohol-induced delusions. Our meeting lasted for 1 hour, and in that time he drank 4 pints of that locally produced noxious black brew, to which he is horribly addicted. His short stature and timorous nature are as such that one cannot help but to be reminded of a frightened hedgehog. His wrinkled features are beyond his years, and his hair and nails are both long and unkempt. Despite this state of dishevelment, the proprietor of the establishment knew his name and poured his drink before we even sat down, a testament to the social accessibility of the ethylated condition. Mr. Hardy's severe condition stems from a tragedy he experienced some 30 years ago. By all accounts, he was a normal and healthy man before the catastrophe. The event in question concerns an omnibus that fell into Dublin's Grand Canal. Mr. Hardy was the driver, and the only man to go into the lock and escape with his life. The other 5 passengers and 1 infant drowned. Since the accident, Mr. Hardy has shifted all feelings of guilt and personal fault to an external source. For the past 30 years, he has been under the delusion that a phantasm, what he terms a monster, caused the accident. The extent of this belief is thorough and pervades his memory. Mr. Hardy tells the story in his own words. "Something spooked the horses that night. It was some sort of monster. I know what I seen. You don't believe me, do you? I was doing the number 7 route like I always done. Normally I bring the bus up on the bridge and it was never a problem, even when the rain's as dense as this here pint. Costello pounded me the all clear on the side of the bus, and just as I was ready to go, old Badger, he started panicking. From the crest of the bridge, I can see right down to Richmond Street. I'll never forget the sight of the monster when I first seen it. It had blinding white eyes, it did, low to the ground like 2 burning lamps. And as it got closer, they started flashing brighter at me. I could hear the thing growling as it come closer, and then it starts making these horrible trumpet screams. You don't believe me, do you? I knew it was aiming to smash right into us, so I tried to get the horses to go at an angle, to move us out of the way, and give that screaming damn thing a wide berth. Pretty soon the old bay mare starts snorting and pulling at the pole chain. There was nothing I could do to stop the pair of them, but Costello got down to try. The horses started backing up, and the bus turned at an angle sharp-like. Just as I hear the bus snapping through the barrier, the monster vanishes right into thin air. I jumped out of my seat just as the bus fell into the lock. Somehow them horses never landed on me. They always were good horses. I've never been able to stop thinking about that monster or all them people that went down into the lock. A bus needs a driver if it's ever going to get where it's going to. You don't believe me, do you? There was that one young lady, prettiest face I ever seen. They pulled her out alive. She was still clutching her wee one. She knew she was dying. She looked right at me and I could see it in her eyes. O'Connell, that was her name. Pretty young lady, I'll never forget her face. "What about our driver?" she said. "What about our driver?" I'll not forget those words ever. I'll remember them clear as day. You don't believe me, do you? Hardy passed away the same year Dr. Hubbardy's book was published. When Hardy's body was found, he was slumped over the counter in his usual seat at the end of the bar farthest from the main road. The barman thought Hardy was dozing, as he was often prone to do. Being a regular customer, he was usually only roused from slumber at last call, and it was only then that the barmaid realized that a corpse had been sitting all night at his bar. Local legend holds that Hardy finished his last pint before dying. Although years of heavy drink were certainly a factor, he is said to have died of natural causes. Naturally, the wake was held at O'Grady's pub, as Burke's was by then called, and Hardy was interred in a small plot in Mount Jerome. Given the profound psychological impact the favorite number 7 tragedy had on the community, you may not be surprised to learn that it has since been woven into the fabric of local folklore. In Father Bernie Kilpatrick's landmark work, Phantoms and Apparitions of South Dublin, we learn that sightings of a black carriage heading north along Rathmines Road is not uncommon, with the earliest recorded account dating to the mid-1890s. Kilpatrick believes that the black carriage is none other than the revenant of the favorite number 7 omnibus. and he bases this supposition on a number of eyewitness accounts he has collected over the decades. In 1916, a factory worker on his way home from a second shift was almost run down one morning by the black carriage. "It disappeared right before my eyes when it reached the crest of the bridge," he recalled. A librarian working late one night in the 1920s saw the black carriage from the library window. He described it rather ponderously as a 19th century omnibus silently pulled by two vaporous steeds without legs. In 1955, a drayman saw the black carriage early one morning as he was going about his deliveries. "It was the queerest thing I ever seen. The carriage was black with 5 pale white passengers, and the 2 horses that were pulling it, I swear their hooves never once touched the ground." Of all the accounts cataloged in Kilpatrick's book, there is one detail that many have in common. The black carriage is always driverless. The black carriage's cultural significance seems to echo that of the legendary banshee. Like a banshee, to see the black carriage signifies impending death or catastrophe. A quick survey of Slattery's patrons will confirm that this is something today's residents of Rathmines still firmly believe. Indeed, one of the most spectacular encounters with the apparition resulted in a near-fatal automobile accident on the 6th of April, 1961. A young man by the name of Padre O'Harity was driving home from a friend's house late one night in Clontarf. As he approached Latouche Bridge, heading south on Richmond Street, he lost control of his car. It had been raining that night, and the car skidded across the rain-slicked road towards the bridge, where it smashed through the barrier and went into the lock chamber. Fortunately, the lock was nearly empty, and an off-duty fireman who was passing at the time was quick into action. Aside from a mild concussion and a clean break off his left radius and ulna, O'Harity was unharmed. The excuse for the crash given in the police report was that O'Harity had too much to drink. On the surface, it was a fairly simple open and shut case. What makes the accident notable is the gossip that developed afterwards. Such news travels quickly in Dublin neighborhoods, and O'Harity happened to be a local Rathmines man. Kilpatrick later interviewed him for Phantoms and Apparitions of South Dublin, and the excerpt is worth reprinting here in its entirety. "It wasn't like the Gardaí said. I'd always heard of this black carriage from me ma and me grandma, but until I seen it, I never believed it. When I did see it, I immediately had this feeling in my gut like something bad was going to happen. The carriage was just standing there at the top of the bridge. It was black. There were horses, 2 of them, I remember. It almost looked like one of them horse-drawn carriages from that Dracula film a few years back. I knew I was going too fast and was going to hit it. I braked hard, but because of all the rain, the car kept skidding towards the bridge. I thought I would smash into the black carriage for sure. I didn't know what to do, so I flashed my high beams, and I started honking the horn so much it would wake the devil. Just as I was about to hit the carriage, it disappeared. I know you don't believe me, but that's what it did. It just disappeared. The next thing I remember was the sound of the barrier breaking. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in St. James all bandaged up. I was real lucky that day. I always had the feeling I shouldn't have survived the accident. Like that black carriage was there waiting for me. I stopped driving after that night. I take the bus now. It's much safer." On the evening of the 6th of April, 2006, a full 145 years after the tragedy, I made my way to Latouche Bridge and sat myself on one of the well-lit benches by the lock. The water between the sluices was calm and deep black. This was the yawning chasm and black abyss described by the reporters, perhaps just melodramatically. What did I expect to happen between the minutes of 9:20 and 9:30 p.m. when the favorite number 7 omnibus met its fate? Was I waiting for 2 ethereal horses pulling the black carriage to gallop amidst modern-day traffic? Or for the disembodied din of the omnibus tumbling into the lock? Perhaps I awaited the white and fish-nibbled faces of the dead to stare up at me from the black abyss. But not so much as a ripple broke the surface of the black waters, and the only sounds to be heard were those of the double-decker buses rocketing across the bridge, and the water as it cascaded over the lower sluice. The sheet of placid water reflected the old Grand Canal Hotel, and divulged none of its secrets. The only thing of note to happen that night was when the lamp perched on the bridge's western railing flickered and died. Instinctively, I took my watch from my pocket. It read 9:24 p.m.